Rain peppered the windshield as the sleek black SUV pulled into the gravel parking lot of a worn-down roadside diner. The glowing sign above flickered weakly. Harvest Grill. It had once stood as a beacon of comfort food and small-town warmth. Now it looked tired. Like everything else in the forgotten corner of Pennsylvania Gavin Cross found himself in. He sat behind the wheel for a long moment, watching a waitress through the fog glass of the window. She handed a to-go cup to an elderly man with weathered hands and a paper-thin coat, smiling with a warmth that somehow cut through the diner's gloom. Her name tag read Lena. Gavin shifted uncomfortably, glancing at himself in the rearview mirror. The man who looked back was unrecognizable. Gone were the tailored suits, the slick hair, and the ever-present Bluetooth earpiece. In their place, a scruffy beard, flannel shirt, and a name tag he'd soon wear bearing the alias Gary Miller. He took a breath and stepped out of the vehicle, hood up against the drizzle, boots crunching against the gravel. Inside, the diner's air was thick with fryer grease and burnt coffee. A teenager behind the counter gave him a side glance, then gestured lazily toward the back. "You here for the dishwasher job?" Gavin nodded. "Yeah, Gary." The teenager didn't respond, only yelled over his shoulder, "Cow." Another one. From the swinging kitchen door emerged a man in his 50s, with thinning hair slicked back with grease that matched the fryer's. Cal eyed Gavin up and down, unimpressed. "No experience needed," he muttered, leading him to the back without introductions. "Just don't break anything, don't talk to customers, and clock out before overtime, got it?" Gavin nodded again, quietly, absorbing every word. The kitchen was small, chaotic, and somehow both too hot and too cold. Orders were barked, plates clanged, and tension hung in the air. A woman with sharp eyes and flour-dusted arms glanced up from the griddle, scrutinizing Gavin like he was an undercooked steak. "New guy?" she asked. "Gary," Cal muttered, already leaving. "I'm Rita," the cook replied, voice gravelly. "Don't touch my knives." Gavin offered a sheepish half-smile and started scrubbing dishes. Within minutes, his hands were soaked and raw. The gloves were torn. The hot water stung. It had been a long time since he'd done physical labor, but he welcomed it. Pain was grounding. Hours passed. He said little, observed much. Lena floated in and out of the kitchen like a ghost on a mission, balancing 5 plates on one arm, checking in with customers, wiping down counters, correcting a young server's mistake without making them feel stupid. Her smile never reached her eyes, but she gave it freely, like it was all she had to offer. He noticed her slip a granola bar into her apron pocket before heading out the back door, likely skipping dinner. By the end of the shift, Gavin's shoulders ached. His disguise held. No one looked too closely at a dishwasher. And that was the point. He had chosen this location for a reason. Harvest Grill was one of his earliest ventures, now swallowed up in a conglomerate of franchise holdings under Crossline Enterprises, his empire. But it had been underperforming, and more than once its employees had filed anonymous complaints about working conditions. His board had urged him to cut losses. Gavin had another idea. He wanted to see it from the ground level, to remember why he started this company in the first place, back when it was about service, not stock prices. He wanted to find out what went wrong. The next evening, Gavin arrived early. He sat in the corner booth during a lull in the dinner rush, nursing a coffee and pretending to read the local paper. The same elderly man from the night before came in, fumbling with his wallet. Lena greeted him by name, Mr. Cohen, and led him to a window seat. Gavin watched as the old man scanned the menu nervously, then quietly folded it without ordering. Lena didn't press. She brought him a bowl of chicken soup anyway. He shook his head, murmuring something about not being able to afford it. Lena only smiled and patted his hand. Gavin tensed. She returned to the counter, slid some cash from her own pocket into the register, and keyed in a manager comp on the receipt. No one noticed. Not the hostess, not the cook. But Gavin did. The act was so quiet, so automatic. She'd done it before. Later, in the kitchen, Gavin caught a glimpse of her counting tips with sore, red fingers. A deep cough racked her chest, but she brushed it off. She didn't see him watching. That night, He lay on the stiff mattress of a budget motel, the sounds of trucks howling down the nearby highway. He thought of Lena's hands feeding a man who couldn't pay, of the way Cal barked at a teenage server for clocking out a minute late, of the food delivery order filled with expired lettuce that had been passed off as usable. There was rot beneath the surface. But what struck Gavin most wasn't the systemic issues. It was her, Lena. She wasn't just working. She was holding the place together with grit and grace, and no one seemed to notice. No one except maybe Rita, who kept her gaze sharp but her mouth shut. The following week, Gavin settled into his role. He worked quietly, efficiently. He didn't ask questions, just listened. He learned that Lena worked double shifts almost every day, that Cal regularly cut hours to avoid overtime pay but still expected the same output, that the only working heater in the kitchen had been broken for weeks. He noticed how Lena always volunteered to stay late, how she took the side tasks no one else wanted, scrubbing grout, organizing the freezer, wiping down booths. She never complained, never asked for anything. One night, Gavin walked out back to throw out trash and found her crouched behind the dumpster. Phone pressed to her ear. "I know, baby. I miss you too. I'll be home soon. Did you eat your sandwich? Good girl. I love you so much. Tell Grandma to give you an extra story, okay?" His breath caught. A child. Of course. She hung up, wiped her eyes, and walked back inside like nothing had happened. Gavin stood still, garbage bag in hand. She wasn't just generous. She was carrying a life on her back while the world watched her stagger and said, "Do more." The next day, Cal docked Lena's pay for miscounting a drawer. She said nothing, just nodded and went back to wiping down tables. Gavin couldn't look away anymore. He was beginning to understand the disease infecting his company, but more importantly, he was starting to see the antidote. And it had a name, Lena. He returned to his station and plunged his hands back into the greasy water, scrubbing harder, hotter, because he knew what came next. He wasn't just here to observe anymore. He was here to change everything. And it started with her. Rain turned to sleet by the third week. Gavin worked at the Harvest Grill. The wind carved through the cracked kitchen windows like a blade, and the space heaters did little but hum. Every corner of the place seemed to shiver. Dishes piled high during the dinner rush, and Gavin lost count of how many times his raw hands plunged into boiling gray water to scrub off dried gravy and grease. The job hadn't gotten easier, only more revealing. Lena still moved like a current, invisible and essential. She kept her smile when customers complained about undercooked steak or cold fries. She handled it all, sometimes with apology, sometimes with a quiet tilt of the head that disarmed even the rudest regulars. Gavin noticed how no one asked her how she was doing. Even Rita, who seemed to respect her more than anyone else did, never asked. The staff functioned like parts in a strained machine, but there was no warmth, no camaraderie. Cal ran the place like a dictator wrapped in a polo shirt and cheap cologne. He had no real authority, just enough to terrify those who had no choice. Gavin noticed the employees rarely made eye contact with him. They flinched when he raised his voice, even over something small like burnt toast or a misplaced ketchup bottle. One afternoon, Gavin walked in early, pretending to need extra prep time. He saw Cal sitting in the manager's office, flipping through payroll reports, talking on his phone with the door cracked just enough. Yeah, clocked him out at 4. Doesn't matter if they stayed till 6, nobody checks. Hell, I'm doing the company a favor, Cal laughed, then dropped his voice. Kid's too slow anyway. Says his mom's sick, don't bring that crap in here. The conversation ended with a snort and the crunch of a snack wrapper. Gavin stood in the hallway, silent, heart pounding. It wasn't just lazy management. It was theft. Back in the kitchen, Rita was sharpening knives, her rhythmic strokes echoing like warnings. She looked at him sideways. "You're quiet," she said. "Just watching," he replied. She narrowed her eyes. "You watch like someone who's writing things down in his head." He smiled faintly, but said nothing. That night, Gavin followed Lena from a distance after her shift. She didn't drive, just walked, hunched against the cold, a threadbare scarf wrapped around her neck. She entered a squat apartment complex with peeling paint and a burned-out porch light. The kind of place no one looked twice at. He waited 5 minutes, then walked past just to glance at the mailboxes. One name caught his eye, L. Monroe. Next to it, the sticker of a cartoon sun, hand-drawn, probably by a child. Back at the motel, Gavin opened his laptop. He hadn't touched it since arriving, but now he couldn't resist. He typed her name into his employee database. The file was thin. 2 years with Harvest Grill, no complaints, no write-ups, no benefits. He frowned. She was listed as part-time, even though she worked full-time hours. A deeper search pulled up a local newspaper article from 18 months ago. Her husband, James Monroe, had died in a construction site collapse. The company named in the article was one of Gavin's subsidiaries, Crossline Developments. He leaned back slowly, staring at the screen. His chest tightened. He remembered the accident vaguely. A structural failure. Payouts handled by legal. An internal memo had called it unfortunate but non-negligent. He had never looked deeper. But now the widow of that man was serving fries and paying for strangers' meals out of her tips. He shut the laptop. The next day, Lena came in late. Cal was waiting. "You're cutting it close, sunshine," he said, arms folded. "We start on time here." "I know. I'm sorry. My daughter had a fever this morning. I couldn't." "Not my problem," he cut her off. "You want hours. You be here before the clock ticks." Gavin watched the shame flash across her face like a slap. She nodded and went straight to work, shoulders tense, lips tight. He approached her later, during a lull, trying to keep his voice casual. "You okay?" She hesitated. "Yeah, just tired. You've been coughing a lot lately." She laughed weakly. "Occupational hazard. Grease and stress." He wanted to say more, ask if she'd seen a doctor, if she needed help, but he wasn't supposed to know her well enough for that. "Let me take care of your tables for a few minutes. Grab some tea." She looked at him strangely, like she wasn't sure if it was a joke. Then she nodded, grateful, and stepped outside with a mug in her hands. Cal reappeared 5 minutes later and found Gavin clearing Lena's section. "Since when does the dishwasher wait tables?" he sneered. Gavin didn't answer, just kept wiping. "You're getting too comfortable," Cal said. "Stick to dishes. You don't belong out here." Gavin met his eyes, just long enough to plant the seed. "Neither do you." That night, Gavin sat with Mrs. Cohen. The elderly widow Lena had helped before. She recognized him now. "You're the quiet one," she said. "Always watching." "I suppose I am." She stirred her coffee slowly. "That girl, Lena, she's the best part of this place. Without her, this place would fall in on itself." Gavin nodded. "You've known her long?" "She waited on me and my husband every Sunday. Even after he passed, she kept bringing me soup. Never let me pay for it. Says the world's already too cruel to the lonely." Gavin's throat tightened. He watched Lena through the window as she served another table, laughing briefly with a child who dropped a spoon. Later that evening, Gavin helped Rita carry in the food delivery. She handed him a box of lettuce that smelled faintly sour. "Usable?" he asked. "Barely." "You always get produce like this?" "Since Cal switched vendors. Says it's cheaper." She looked at him again with that same suspicious glint. "What's your story, Gary?" He shrugged. "Just passing through." She smirked. "Sure you are." By now, Gavin had seen enough to fill an internal audit report. Labor violations, food safety risks, employee abuse. But none of it disturbed him as deeply as Lena's silence, the way she accepted everything, endured it with quiet grace. She never asked for sympathy, never fought back, as if she didn't believe she deserved better. The next afternoon, Lena slipped on a wet floor in the kitchen, catching herself with her wrists. Rita rushed to help her up. Cal poked his head in, annoyed. "If you're not dying, get back to work." Lena winced but stood. "I'm fine." "You sure?" Gavin asked quietly. She nodded. No time to not be. He watched her limp slightly as she walked away. Watched her tuck that pain somewhere no one else could see. Gavin returned to the sink and kept scrubbing, steam curling around his face. But in his mind, something had shifted. He wasn't just learning anymore. He was counting down. Every hour brought him closer to a reckoning. And when it came, no one would be ready. The first snow of the season fell like ash, soft and slow, blanketing the town in silence. But inside the Harvest Grill, the tension was loud. Cal was in a foul mood, and everyone felt it. Orders were backed up, a fryer had shorted out mid-lunch rush, and one of the new servers had accidentally given a customer the wrong check. Cal's voice had cut through the dining room like a whip. "You think this is a charity? You think mistakes don't cost me money?" he barked, glaring at the girl, who looked ready to cry. Lena had stepped in again, gently diffusing the chaos. She always did. But this time, Gavin saw the crack. She didn't smile after, didn't reassure, just kept her head down and moved faster. Gavin had spent the last week collecting evidence quietly. Phone recordings, photos, timesheets that didn't match the hours employees actually worked. He'd created a file so damning it could get Cal removed overnight and trigger a full internal compliance audit across the region. But it wasn't enough. Something in him refused to let this end in paperwork alone. It wasn't about just fixing policies anymore. It was about justice. Later that evening, Gavin caught Lena coughing again in the back alley, bent over, one hand against the brick wall. He stepped beside her without saying anything. She straightened, wiping her mouth. "I'm okay," she said hoarsely. "You're not." She looked at him, eyes tired, cheeks pale. "What do you want me to do? I have a daughter. Rent's due next week. I don't have time to be sick." "Lena." "No," she interrupted, voice cracking. "I don't need pity. I need this job." Gavin's chest tightened. "You deserve better than this." She gave a bitter smile. "Yeah, well, life doesn't care what you deserve." She walked back inside, and Gavin stayed there a moment longer, watching her shadow disappear into the kitchen. The next morning, he arrived earlier than usual. The diner was still dark, and the silence was absolute. He unlocked the side entrance. Cal had given him a key weeks ago, never bothering to vet him properly, and moved to the office. He placed the thick envelope on Cal's desk. Inside, everything. Every lie, every violation, every theft. And, at the top, a single sticky note. "You'll want to leave before this goes public. GC." By the time the doors opened at 7 a.m., Gavin was already behind the dishwasher, arms plunged into suds, as if nothing had changed. Cal stormed in late, as usual, but today his swagger was missing. He walked to the back office, pulled open the door, and disappeared inside. 5 minutes passed, then 10. When he emerged, his face was bloodless. He moved like a man whose future had just collapsed in on itself. Gavin watched him from the corner of his eye. Cal didn't speak, didn't bark orders. He simply walked out the front door, phone clutched in his hand, not even glancing at the staff. Lena glanced at the clock. "He's late yelling at someone," she murmured, confused. By mid-afternoon, a corporate vehicle pulled into the lot. 2 suits stepped out and headed straight for the office. They said nothing to the staff, just nodded once and shut the door behind them. Rita raised an eyebrow. "Something's going on." Gavin only shrugged. Maybe karma. Word spread quickly. By the dinner rush, Cal was gone. Officially. Terminated. Some said he resigned. Others said he was escorted out. No one knew for sure. But the effect was instant. The fear hanging in the air lifted like fog. Staff exchanged cautious glances, unsure whether to hope or brace for the worst. That night, the diner was half full when a large man in an expensive overcoat entered, his polished shoes clicking against the tile. He had a presence that made the room go still. His gaze swept over the staff and landed squarely on Gavin. Lena noticed first. Her brow furrowed. "Do you know him?" she whispered. Gavin removed his apron slowly, wiped his hands. "I do." He stepped into the dining room, heart hammering. The staff watched confused. Rita stepped out from the kitchen, arms folded. The man extended his hand. "Mr. Cross," he said with a smile. "We've been expecting your return." Gasps followed like a wave. Dishes clattered. A fork hit the floor. Lena's eyes widened. "Mr. Cross? As in the CEO?" Gavin looked at her, and everything he had hidden threatened to rise at once. He nodded. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. The staff stood in stunned silence. Someone muttered, "No way." Rita blinked hard. "I knew you were too clean to be a dishwasher." "I needed to see the truth," Gavin said, voice steady. "And I saw it. All of it." He turned toward Lena. Her expression was unreadable. Shock, confusion, maybe even betrayal. "You lied," she said softly. "I did," he admitted. "But not to hurt anyone. I needed to understand what this place had become. And I never would have seen it from a boardroom." She looked away, jaw clenched. "I saw what you did," he continued. "Not just for that old man. For everyone. You've been holding this place together on your back while the system failed you." Lena crossed her arms, eyes glistening. "You had the power to fix this the whole time. And now I will. Starting tonight." He looked around at the staff. "Effective immediately, every employee here is being upgraded to full benefits. Healthcare, real schedules, paid sick leave, back pay for hours you were cheated out of. And this diner will undergo a full renovation, new equipment, higher wages, and a management team that actually respects you." The room was silent. Rita was the first to speak. "Is this for real?" Gavin nodded. "I owe you more than I can say." Finally, Lena looked up at him. Her voice was quiet, but firm. "And what about people like me? The ones left behind in your spreadsheets? You never came after James died. You never asked." His heart clenched. "I didn't know. And I should have," he said. "That's on me. But I'm here now. And I'm listening." She stared at him, trying to decide if she believed it. "You say you want to fix things," she whispered. "Then prove it. Don't disappear." Gavin stepped closer. "I won't." Their eyes met. And for the first time, there was no pretense between them. Only truth. Behind them, the fryer buzzed. The bell over the door rang. Life went on. But nothing would ever be the same again. The days that followed unfolded like a storm breaking into sunlight, messy, raw, and slowly warming. Word of Gavin's true identity spread through the diner and into the neighborhood like wildfire. Some regulars returned just to see if the rumors were true. Others came because, for the first time in years, someone at the top had come down to look them in the eye. But not everyone was quick to celebrate. Lena showed up for her shift 2 hours early the next day. Not to work, but to think. She sat alone in booth 7, the one by the window where light streamed in just right, and sipped coffee, black. Gavin saw her through the past window and hesitated before approaching. No more disguises. No more secrets. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. She gestured to the seat across from her without looking up. He sat, hands folded. Silence stretched between them like a fragile thread. "I didn't sleep last night," she said finally. "Neither did I." She glanced out the window. "You could have walked in here any day with a clipboard and a title. But you chose to scrub grease off our plates. Why? Because a clipboard wouldn't have shown me who you are, what you've lived through. I needed to feel the weight of it." He paused. "I needed to see what I'd ignored." She met his eyes then, really looked. He didn't see resentment, just a hard-earned wariness. "I'm not asking for an apology," she said. "I'm asking what comes next." Gavin nodded slowly. "This place becomes the model. Not just better, but right. We fix the rot from the inside out, starting with full wage audits and leadership reviews across every franchise." Lena nodded, her fingers tightening around the coffee mug. "You're not the man I expected a billionaire to be." He smiled faintly. "Neither am I." Their moment was interrupted by a small voice from the entrance. "Mom." Lena turned quickly. A little girl with honey-colored hair stood holding a stuffed lion, oversized sweater slipping off one shoulder. Her daughter, Emma. Emma ran to the booth, climbing into Lena's lap without hesitation. "Who's he?" she whispered, peering shyly at Gavin. "He's a friend," Lena said, brushing her daughter's hair back. Gavin's heart squeezed. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a wrapped chocolate bar he'd picked up from the cafe down the street. "For you," he said gently, offering it. Emma beamed and looked at her mother for approval. Lena hesitated a beat, then nodded. "Thank you," Emma said before ripping open the wrapper. "She's beautiful," Gavin said quietly. "She's why I do everything, Lena replied. Even stay in places that hurt. He studied her, the quiet strength in her posture, the calm urgency of a woman who'd faced too many storms and survived them all. You shouldn't have to choose between survival and dignity, he said. No one should. From that morning on, change came swiftly. A new district manager was installed. One Gavin had worked with personally, someone who valued compassion as much as efficiency. Health inspectors, HR reps, and renovation crews rotated through daily. Broken equipment vanished. Pay stubs were corrected. People smiled, genuinely, for the first time in months. Even the regulars began tipping better, sensing something new blooming beneath the surface. Rita approached Gavin one afternoon with a grin. Got a call from corporate. They're offering me a training supervisor role. Benefits. Paid vacation. First time in 22 years. She raised her eyebrows. You really meant it. I did, Gavin said. And there's more coming. But with progress came pushback. A few corporate board members, upon hearing how Gavin had operated undercover, questioned his methods. Risk exposure, they called it. A breach of protocol. Gavin stood before them, unflinching. You send surveys and spreadsheets and wonder why no one tells the truth, he said. But I walked among them. I scrubbed their dishes. I saw what your systems miss. This wasn't a stunt. It was the only way to understand what our culture really costs. Silence. And then, one of the older board members, a woman who'd grown up working in diners herself, simply said, let him finish what he started. The vote passed. Gavin stayed. Back at Harvest Grill, Lena worked fewer shifts now, by design. Gavin had quietly arranged full tuition coverage for her return to school. Social work, she said. She wanted to help other single parents navigate the same hell she'd lived through. One evening, after closing, Gavin waited outside in the parking lot with 2 cups of coffee. Lena emerged, locking the door behind her. You waiting for someone? She asked with a smile. Just the woman who changed how I see the world. She rolled her eyes, but accepted the cup. They sat on the hood of his car, sipping in silence. Did you ever wonder why I paid for that man's meal? She asked suddenly. All the time. She looked up at the stars. Because I knew what it felt like to be forgotten. To have dignity stolen in small, cruel ways. If I couldn't fix the world, I could at least make one person feel seen. He stared at her, moved beyond words. And that's what I forgot somewhere along the way. It's not about profits. It's about people. She gave him a long look. So what now, Mr. CEO? He laughed. Now, I listen more, led less from above. And maybe take you both out to dinner sometime. My treat. No disguises. Lena raised an eyebrow. We don't do fancy. Good, Gavin said, grinning. Neither do I anymore. Emma's laugh echoed from inside the car, where she was playing with a toy on the back seat. Life was still messy, still uncertain. But tonight, something sacred had been restored. Not just justice, not just change, redemption. And in the warmth between 2 paper cups, under a sky of quiet stars, Gavin finally understood the fortune he almost missed. The richest lives aren't built in boardrooms. They're found in the kitchens, the corners, the kindnesses no one sees, until someone finally does.